I started without, and Dad, you got your.
I got my ears on
Get
too.
your ears on
no,
too.
I don't have my ears on.
Come on.
Okay. There we go.
We're just sitting here talking.
That's right.
Welcome to Joy Medicine. I'm glad you're joining us here. I'm really interested in hearing about this show because my dad, Dr. Richard Cashion here, who we're doing this podcast together, said that he thought that it was worthwhile to talk about my birth.
Your birth.
I was there, but don't remember it. So, and I don't think that I've heard.
I think there will be the details. I
don't think I've heard the total story. I've heard. Well, we'll see what I've heard.
Well, it's really funny, Trey. The thing that I've enjoyed about this so much is, and I would invite people out there to do what we're doing. In other words, to sit down and talk about with your father or grandfather your life, and it is so nice that this show has resulted in recording a lot of this because it's important. And I think it's really important for people out there to realize how important family is and the traditions of family. And I recently wrote that book, The Road from Troas, about my life because I wanted to be all the kids, particularly the grandkids, and we have now 16.
Yeah.
16 grandkids.
You got 2 grandkids.
That's right.
Yeah.
that the
great grandkids. I'm sorry.
2 great, and a third one on the way. But the point is, we have a large number. And the thing that I did back with my father, he was dying of a heart attack, but he was a physician. He didn't want to go to the hospital. And as a matter of fact, expletive deleted had said, I'm not going to the hospital. And
and he's aware that he was dying.
Yeah, right.
Well, he had a heart attack.
He had cancer of the prostate and whatnot. So he was not at all afraid or whatever. He just said, stay with me and let's talk. And that'll help relieve my mind of the pain, and it did. And so we talked all night, and I learned things about him that I never knew. And if that occasion had not occurred, I would have never learned those things. And I've reflected on that many, many times. It was probably the neatest night I had with my father in my entire life. And I hope he had as much feeling as I did. Well, it's interesting. Pam, my wife at that time, and I went off to San Francisco to go to a meeting, and sure enough, he died while we were gone. So it was my last time to really have a close encounter with him. And so what I'm saying is that sometimes history of events is helpful. And we were thinking about a show today, and I thought, Trey, your arrival in the world was a big event for me, and I would like to tell you a little bit about it. Right. So that's what we're going to do. I'm
sure there was an OB there, I imagine.
That's right. So anyway, your kids and grandkids may someday want to hear this, but I was in medical school when your mom and I married, and within the first year, she was on the way to have you. Okay,
right?
She was pregnant, and so here I was in medical school, and she was much smarter than me. But anyway, she would follow around and keep us. So she knew I was in a lecture hall. I was at in University of Texas Galveston. There was a big amphitheater-like lecture hall, and so she is very pregnant, and we knew she was going to deliver soon. And back in those days, nobody did ultrasound. We didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or girl or what. We just knew a baby was on the way. And so she was at home, and her water broke, and so she knew it was time to go. So where is the dad? Me. Where was I? I was in a lecture, medical school lecture. It was in the afternoon late, and all my friends, and we were all close class, started turning around. I was sitting way back at the back. I don't know why. I usually sit at the front, way back at the back, and I could see all the heads turning around looking for me, and Pam's staying at the door down at the front of the amphitheater waving and saying, "It's time."
Right.
So I got out and went out and so she was admitted in labor, and so we're sitting there in labor. Well, things continued on, and labor continued on, And finally, and they didn't have any of this fancy equipment. By I guess his examination or whatever, it's called a transverse arrest. You were on the way in the birth control and you got stuck.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so they were worried about what was this going to mean, and they had to get you out. So it was, I guess, about, I don't know, about 5 o'clock in the morning. She had been in labor since like 5 o'clock in the afternoon before. And so lots of prayers. And Pam was not at all fearful or upset. You know, you see a lot of these movies where the lady in labor is in severe distress and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Not at all.
Wow.
Your mom was joking and smiling. Oh, it hurts a little bit. Yeah, you know, whatever. But the point is that the OB guy, I believe his name is Dr. Powell, came in and he told me, and told Pam, your mom, we were standing there together. He said, the baby's stuck. And so we need to have a cesarean section. So that was an amazing thing. So it was like, okay, let's go. So they wheeled her off to go into the operating room, and there was, in John Seeley Hospital where I was at the time, there are observation windows. So that in the OR where she was, I could go in and watch. And so sure enough, they were in there, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen a cesarean section, but it's going and blowing fast. I mean, they're not slow. It's not slow, delicate surgery, but I mean, it's like,
right,
because they're trying to get the baby out. A little bit of distress, and for me too. You were having distress, and that was why they wanted to do this thing, get it over. So I'm watching through the window, and sure enough, he pulled you out, and there you were. So that's the first time I saw you. It was some people may not, but it was a bloody mess. You know,
yeah.
Obviously, you've seen the pictures and this stuff, but it was a really happy event. And of course, they laid you up on your mom, and I'm in the OR. I couldn't get in the OR. In those days, they wouldn't let the father in the OR.
Right.
Like I'm watching through the window. So I'm about 10 feet away, maybe 20 feet away, watching this event. So it's was a cesarean section, and it's amazing. She has had a great attitude all the time. It was a semi-private room, so they wheeled her in this semi-private room, and the other mother that was there with her was like movie star quality. She was a beautiful lady, and then had a baby and had her hair fixed and makeup on and everything. So Pam rolled in, and she looked at this lady. She looked at me and she said, "Why is this different? What happened?" Well, anyway, so it was good, and so we were very happy to have you join us, and it was an amazing event. But the cesarean section was the medical part of things that were a little bit different. A lot of people have a normal delivery, and it's interesting. Your mom had you, and then your brother was a cesarean section. Then the third brother, Hayde, happened on a
trip to Austin. Yeah, over Thanksgiving.
She went in, but she was only like 6 months pregnant at the time.
Right. We
were up at the lake house, and so she was starting to have these pains, and she said, I'm in labor again. I'm getting those funny back pains again." And so we were up at the lake house, which is 60 miles from Austin. So we had to make arrangements. And I think the doctor's name, I'm having trouble remembering. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, DeRosier, but anyway, we had called your aunt, Rowdy's wife, and found out the name of her doctor, her OB-GYN doctor, and found out. So we called him and said, "Look, we're in a little bit of a trouble because Pam went into labor, and she's had 2 prior C-sections." Now, back in those days, and even today, you're not supposed to have a normal delivery after 2 C-sections. So we got her into the hospital, and when we were there. I don't know if people may not remember the story about President Kennedy. He had a child that had problems with early delivery. It's a lung problem, and so the doctor said that the process of going through the birth canal would actually help the lungs, and so it'd be better since it was such a tiny. He only weighed less than 3 pounds. That it's not going to be a problem. The uterus won't have to work too hard. So as far as causing uterine rupture, so they came and they said, well, let's go ahead and have a normal delivery. So we did, and so Haid was a normal delivery. So she had C-section, normal delivery, and then Christopher came along, your brother, later, and so we were in the Air Force at that time, and it was decided that obviously we just need to have a C-section. So it was a planned date. We were there. And the funny thing there that happened, again, I wasn't in the OR, but I was in the observation room at the Air Force Hospital within 20 feet of your mom. And so I'm in there, standing there watching, saying prayers, of course. Always said lots of prayers. And this guy walked in with the camera. And he started taking pictures and looking around. And he looked over at me and he said, "Are you the father?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, my Lord, I'm in the wrong room." Just taking pictures. He left, and then Haid came along, and she had a normal delivery with Haid. So I don't do obstetrics. So it's funny, when I was in medical school, I probably delivered 20 or 30 babies, but I don't remember any of that. That was
well, it's funny you talk about that because those are such big events. I mean they're life-altering events, and it seems like, because I remember from my own, I can remember Boppy telling stories about, which I can't imagine, he told about when Mom was born, but of course Mom was a twin. Penelope was her sister, and he was telling me that that Bommy, my grandmother, his wife, was having such horrible labor. She almost died as a result of that. Penny died at birth, and Mom was
near death.
Yeah, and I just remember him saying, it was really at the point where, 1941.
They've come a long way, because I can remember he was saying the doctor came in and told him that they needed oxygen for the baby, which was your mom. And he said, well, get it.
Right.
Why are you asking me? Just get the oxygen. Well, they had to go someplace in Austin to get the oxygen tank. They didn't have it. I mean,
right.
Things have changed a whole lot.
Well, I think there's tremendous joy with the birth of a baby, but I know in my life, I know in yours, obviously with Haid, that was traumatic, because back then, being born at 6 months, I mean, even now that's a major
6 pounds, yeah.
But he was only 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, 6 months pregnant, yeah.
So not a full pregnancy back in 1969 was a big deal. Not that it's not a big deal now, but the events that occur, how much healthcare workers are involved in that joy. But there's also, at that joy, there's things that happen. Like when I think about when our third child was born, he was the most uneventful pregnancy of any of the pregnancies. Born everything fine, and it's so fine that I left with her holding the baby and went home to get the two older kids, Trevor and Madison, and my in-laws, and say, let's go up and see the baby. Well, we walk in, no baby, and Stephanie's bawling, crying, And so that's why I think it's so important for those people who are in those events to have some faith. I remember a deacon was there as I walked out, and I remember he was notorious for this prayer. He would just say, "Whatever, Lord," and he was saying that to me. I'm like, no, not whatever. You want the kid to be okay. But I asked my brother, and apparently they've still never been able to figure out what actually happened, but they ended up having to life flight him because he went purple from his waist down. That's why my brother was holding him and his foot came out and his foot was purple. And so instead of alerting Stephanie, he just walked out to the nurse calmly. He's in healthcare too, and said, "Hey, you probably need to come and check on this baby." And came in, ran him out, and ends up getting life flight. But this is a full, this is what's, this is the craziness. So we think everything's fine. And they say we have to life flight this baby down to Texas Children's in Houston. And, Stephanie says, "Well, I'm going." And they say, "Well, there's no room on the thing, and plus you can't leave. I mean, you just had a baby. You need to stay here." And she said, "I'm going." And so I remember they said, "We're going to have to sign, AMA, against medical advice that you're leaving." And we left and went down there, and she was, it bothered, but we went in there. But you got to imagine this 8-pound, 6-ounce baby, relatively large. I don't know if it's that big, but relatively large baby gets life flighted. So we fly down to, not fly in the car. We fly.
You were flying on the ground
down there, get a hotel room right next to Texas Children's, and then immediately go over. So you walk into a level 4 nursery, and you become very aware of how big. And the guy comes out, and as we're walking through, there's these little bitty babies. I mean, babies that were born
because of
25, 26 weeks. I mean, they might be 2 pounds. They're extraordinarily small. And you walk around the corner, and there's this chunker of a baby that's ours. And the doctor goes, what the heck is this baby doing down here? And I was like, "Well, this is what happened." And he said, "Well, we can't find anything wrong with him." Yeah. I mean, we're going to run all these tests. And you told him, the doctor told us that lack of perfusion in the legs, don't know what happened, why that's happened or whatever. So again, like you said, it goes from a joyful day, a day that seemed to be uneventful, to, in the matter of a few hours, completely flipping crisis. And us going down there. And then when we get down there, the doctor's like, "There's nothing wrong with this baby. I don't know why he got life flighted down here." I said, "Well, there was something wrong with him."
Yeah, probably.
So I think, again, it's,
and there were lots of prayers.
I promise you, we were praying the entire way down. I don't even think we talked. I mean, as we're going as fast as you could possibly go down Highway 6 and around to get to Texas Children's. And I guess my point is I think there are certain specialties. I mean, all specialties have some things that are something to do with the spiritual life and being kind and confident and faithful. But there are also other ones that are major events. So a heart surgeon,
right?
Those are life or death. A brain surgeon, I would think, would be life or death. A cancer, an oncologist would be life or death. Don't often think about an OB-GYN. It's such a
thank
joyful.
God, because most of them are okay.
Right, most of them are okay, but just recounting my experience, your experience, and my grandfather's experience, all three had major, like, it's the most joyful day in the world, and then all of a sudden it turns into, oh my gosh,
right.
What is going on, and how important it is for physicians in that. We've talked about that to some extent, but for them to be confident, for them to be calm, for them to be somebody who is understanding but is able to turn on a dime, because some of them, but I mean, birth requires a lot of prayers. I mean, I remember going multiple times from the hospital on various occasions on multiple of the kids, and spending a ton of time in the church in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and praying.
And getting back to our last show, I know there's another angel up there, and her name is Penelope Ann as opposed to Pamela Ann. So
Right.
they're identical twins. So maybe when I get to heaven, it's going to be hard to say which one's which.
But I will say,
But the point is that they're up there together,
right.
and I've thought about that a lot. When Pam died, that I thought she's with Penelope, her sister. Never seen her.
I'm not sure the world could have handled two Pams.
That's Pam always said that. Pam, that was her comment. She said God in his wisdom knew that the world could not take two of us.
Right. So, but again, I think that it's so important because number one, if everything goes well, it's one of the most joyful occasions ever to have a baby. I mean, let's look like the story where the mother didn't know that the daughter was pregnant.
Right,
I mean, maybe that was, but typically it's a joyful occasion. But when it turns on a dime,
and it's usually a bad turn, like a crisis. And so it's in dealing with those crises. And in cardiology, I dealt with a lot of them. That it's in a matter of a second or two, things have gone from very bright and shiny to very dark and concerning. And so I thought, it's interesting that you mentioned, and it's interesting thinking about these things. And the reason I wanted to go over this with you I don't know if you knew all the details of your arrival in the world, but I would recommend to the people out there to do an oral history of some sort. Tell your life to your kids and your grandkids, because many times that's forgotten. And then,
well, so I think one of the things that I've, and we've tried to do this before, but one of the cool things, particularly through the eyes of faith, is to really map out, especially for a married couple, to map out, where they went, how'd they end up meeting, all what happened over the course of the marriage, all the different things that occur, the ups, the downs, the difficulties. And what I saw was the hand of God in it. Like looking back, you're like, there's so many things that happened that got us to where we are today, that we wouldn't be the same. And even the bad things, even the things that during the time you're going through it, you want it to be over, or you want it to not, last any longer, or whatever. Even those things are things that shape.
Well, it's interesting. I can't remember where I heard this recently, but a lot of times you'll hear say, God, why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me? And the answer to that is He did it for you.
Right. Yeah.
So that it's actually something in your life He's trying to direct you to change.
Right. And so that's the eyes of faith that I think we have to see. And I think when you're in situations, most of my stuff that I do day to day is not life or death. It may seem like life or death,
some
but
people
it really
seems like it. Yeah.
But it really isn't. I think that healthcare, because it involves people typically in some sort of, there's some reason that they're in the healthcare system. A child's sick, and it could be just a cold or a strep throat. It doesn't matter. I mean, first baby, I used to joke like it hit 100.1 and it was like to the ER. You learn later that that's not the case.
Well, the latest joke, or not a joke, but it's talking about when somebody's having trouble with a kid, we say, talk to Stephanie, that's Trey's wife, because they were 6.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that, but they're healthcare workers are in the middle of major events, and even if they aren't major from a medical standpoint, often for the patients, for the parents, like if it's a kid that's sick, even if it's nothing, you have situations where you have to be comforting. You have to exude some confidence. You have to say, well, this is going to be okay, or we're going to take care of them, even when it's minor, right? Because I can remember being really worried. The flip side of that is you get to the third child, and I a lot of my customers are physicians, and you get to the third child, and we're like, okay, we'll wait. He's got 103 fever. He's got a really bad cough, all that kind of stuff. And then, about 4 or 5 in the morning, he's in bed with us, and I can his breathing rate is like 150. I'm counting. I mean, he's panning practically, and get up but because we've had 2 others, we're like, okay, we can weather this storm. He'll be fine. We rush to the doctor,
of course,
the next day, and then they say, oh, his sats, his O2 sats were like at 88 or something. I mean, he was heading towards respiratory distress. Yeah. And anyway, everything's fine. It all works out. But I go the next day to go visit a doctor, and I'm recounting this to her. Well, she's an asthma doctor. I've never been chewed out more by a physician. She says, you don't ever do that again. I mean, kids die from that. So I think on both sides, you got to, because of the position you're in as a physician, it never happened again. It's not like I worried, but it was like, okay, if this happens with this person, I'm not going to do it. We didn't have any other doctor say that to us. I came home and I said, this doctor chided me. I mean, she ripped into me and said, I've seen children die. This is not to create any heartburn for people out there. I mean, but you do need doctors that will tell you the truth, that exude confidence, and sometimes redirect your thing. I'm sure you had to tell people they got to quit smoking or or whatever, right? I mean, right. In your position, you have a responsibility to tell, hey, you need to change some things. Otherwise, you're going to be back here in this similar situation, and maybe it ends up worse than it.
Yeah, sure. And the big thing is, if for like addiction and dealing with addiction and like the alcoholism, and when I trained in Boston City Hospital, every patient was an alcoholic almost. It was like right. They were all, and very hard for them to stop. So you can tell them quit drinking. Well, in fact, most of them don't, and that's the tragedy. But it's
anyway, I think we've gone all over the place. It started with my birth, and we've ended up in alcoholics in Boston. In Boston, so that's what happens here. But I think the key is to help point out something that I'm sure all the doctors out there know, that you're involved in major life occurrences, whether it's a small illness or a major event, and you have the opportunity to be Jesus to those people. You have the opportunity to tell them the truth, to correct them if they need to be corrected, or to be there in the midst of something that is causing angst, to try to calm them down. And that's the way you can be Jesus to them. And I just think that's an important point, from alcoholism to births.
Right.
How about that for a wrap up? Anyway.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the title. I've been thinking about, what are we going to title this one? Alcoholism to birth.
But anyway, thanks for listening. I hope that was not too random for you, but we enjoyed the conversation. Y'all have a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you later. Bye.